a couple months ago, I made a video where I was talking about how this is the beginning of a revolution and how, this is a movement that's going to take time. And I was speaking to people who were outspoken about what was happening to Palestinians and basically saying that, just as we begin to fall into despair or we want to give up, there would be a new wave of people that would come and join the movement and bring that energy back up. And it's so crazy to me because that was just a couple months ago. And now seeing that 33 colleges across America have joined the protesting in solidarity with Palestine is incredible. I mean, 33 colleges, some of the most prestigious colleges in America, some of the most prestigious colleges in the world. These college students have built encampments to be in solidarity with Palestinians because watching this genocide has become unbearable. It has become unbearable, and these college students have everything riding on it, and they are risking it all because that is their humanity. It is humanity. These college kids are only 18, 19 years old, fucking young, and these colleges are calling the SWAT team, cops, armed militias, the National Guard on college students, and they're fighting them. They're beating them up. They're literally physically being violent to these 18, 19-year-old college students. And it's just incredible to see that even though I personally sometimes cannot endure what's happening, I too fall into despair. And now to see so many of these college students, so many colleges across America join this movement, it revives some type of hope in me. And I just want to say that I hope that Palestine is not the end of this movement, of this revolution, because all of our struggles are interconnected. It is so important that we remember and recognize and see and be in support and solidarity with what's happening in Congo, in Sudan, in Tigray, in Haiti, in Kashmir, in East Turkestan, in Tibet. All of these struggles across the global south and many more. It matters, and our liberation cannot happen unless it is connected, unless it's happening together. That is what collective liberation is. And it is so important for us to recognize that it is the global south that experiences the brunt of capitalism and Western consumerism. It is the global south that has been raped of its natural resources for far too long, and now it is the global south that is experiencing so much of climate change, and that will inevitably cause mass migration, which will inevitably cause war. So it is so important for us to recognize that with this movement, with this revolution, it is all interconnected. And it is so important for us to recognize what collective liberation is, because I cannot be free without you being free. Palestinians cannot be free without the rest of Congo and Sudan and Tigray and Haiti also being free. Our movements, our struggles are all interconnected. It is so important and imperative that we remember that and we stand in solidarity, because the long game has to be freedom. It has to be freedom. It has to be systematic change, because we are literally running out of time. There's no way around it. There's no way to say it. We are running out of time in every way possible. So I've been in Thailand for a couple months, and there's a lot of Russian people here, a lot. And I made a conscious effort to get to know some of these Russians because I wanted to know what was happening in Russia. How do they feel about it? How do they feel about their government? How do they feel about the war in Ukraine? Because so much of my tax dollars is going to Ukraine to fight Russia. And one thing I learned is that many Russians do not believe in the war with Ukraine. And actually, many of them are here because they're trying to escape fighting the war with Ukraine. What's happening in Russia is that you could be walking to work, you can be walking outside, you can be at home, and they are coming and grabbing men and drafting them into the war. And so a lot of Russians are basically trying to escape that. And one thing I've also learned is that so many of them I was talking to have actually applied for green cards to come to America. And I thought that was so funny because me as an American has been thinking about leaving America, because I feel that my existence in America is supporting a genocidal country. I live on stolen land. I pay taxes to a government that is using that money to kill civilians all across the global south. And so I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about how if we're all just trying to leave where we're from, who's actually staying to fight? Who's actually staying to fight back against the system? Because at the end of the day, it is, even though we all have different governments, we are all fighting one system, right? It's one system that is oppressing us. So you have Iranians fighting the Islamic Revolution. You have Russians fighting against their government. You have Americans fighting back against our government. You have, Kashmiris fighting against the Indian government. You have, on and on, Tibetans fighting against China. It is one system. We are all in the same game, just different devils. And the thing is, much of colonization and slavery and apartheid didn't end because our oppressor had a change of heart. It just got expensive for our oppressor. So they give us the illusion that, hey, look, you won. But really, we're in this perpetual cycle of living inside of a system. And I've thought about this so deeply because it's getting to the point that we have to actually think about fighting back, changing the system from inside. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? We have to change the system that we live in from the inside. In the book, The Alchemist, if you haven't read The Alchemist, it's basically about this kid who goes on this journey to find treasure. And at the end of the book, he realizes that the treasure was buried where he started. But had he not gone on the journey, he would never have known that the treasure was where he started. And it's a very poetic book. But I think that is real life. And I think it's so important that we all as individuals go on the journey in life. You have to inject yourself into the world and not watch the world spin as a bystander. You get what I'm trying to say? Like, we actually have to have wisdom, to have experience, to have knowledge, to grow, to evolve. You have to go on this journey. And that change, that journey is what changes us. So that has to happen within. And so when we think about the world, if we want to change the system, we all have to change it from the inside. Because sure, maybe at one point they'll actually free Palestine, but it won't be because our oppressor had a change of heart. It'll be because it's too expensive. Even now, I'm thinking about how much money and funding does America have to literally continue to fund Israel. Billions and billions of dollars have gone to the apartheid state of Israel in just the past 6 months. That's American tax dollars. I'm thinking about at what point does that fund run out? So it is so important for us to think about a systematic change, a change of system, instead of just thinking on such a low level of like, let's change one part of it. No, we need to change the way we live, because what's happening simultaneously is that we have climate change also happening. And climate change isn't just, oh, the weather's changing, it's now hot, now it's cold. No, it's also changing farmland. How are we producing food? How are we getting our food? Once we start to get hungry, it's over. Once your children start to be hungry, it's over. You don't want to live in a world where you can't feed your kids anymore, where people cannot feed their kids anymore. And we're getting to that point. And the only thing that can actually stop it is us, to change the system, to change all these capacities in how we live. A lot of people don't talk about this, but prior to Biden's presidency, Obama was the most pro-Israeli president in U.S. history. And it's so important that we discuss this, because oftentimes I see people of color see other people of color in these high positions of power and think that this is a win for us. But in fact, it is indoctrination. Obama, despite the fact he did not have a good relationship with Netanyahu, he provided the most weapon sales and funding to the apartheid state of Israel in U.S. history. The reason that $3 billion of American taxpayer dollars goes to the apartheid state of Israel is because Obama signed this deal. $3 billion of U.S. taxpayer dollars goes annually to Israel because of Obama. He built them the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome is what prevents missiles and rockets from entering Israel's atmosphere. It is so important to recognize that people of color in these high positions of power are participating in our own extermination and genocide. And it's so important that we start to take them off the pedestal. We need to recognize that it is people of color in these high positions of power that are participating in our oppression, in our genocide, in our extermination. This is Biden's press secretary. This is New York City's mayor. This is the U.S.'s Security Council, which vetoed every single ceasefire that was presented at the United Nations. This is another member of the U.S. Security Council that vetoed a ceasefire in Gaza. This is NYPD's first Latino commissioner. This is Columbia University's first Arab president. The greatest fear that lives in the hearts and minds of white supremacists is that if people of color are free, they will want to take revenge. Despite the fact that after colonization ended, apartheid ended, slavery ended, people of color have never taken revenge against white people. Even now, when they have the conversation that, oh, if Palestinians are free, they will kill all the Israelis. This is not true. But still, when white people see people of color moving to America, to Australia, to Canada, to Europe, they see this as a threat to their existence, because if they become outnumbered and they become the minority, then that means that people of color are now the majority, which means that they get to make the rules and they will eventually want to take revenge against them. So what they do instead is that they put people of color in these high positions of power to create an illusion that progress is being made. But what in fact happens is that people of color are now the face of genocide, the face of extermination, the face of oppression, and it confuses us, right? But we are also participating in it because we put these people of color who made it on a pedestal, and we think, oh, this is a win for us. But if you just look at the NYPD and see all the people of color now in the NYPD, it makes it harder to say the NYPD is a racist organization, right? And the way that we are seeing these police beating the shit out of college students across America. These are not just white police officers. These are people of color. These are people of color in these police departments beating up students who are protesting, who are peacefully protesting against a genocide and extermination of Palestinians in Gaza. I think one other thing that's important to also point out is that I see people of color who have been let down by the Democratic Party now looking at Trump like, hey, you know what? I'm now a MAGA supporter. And it's like, it's giving Stockholm syndrome. It's giving Stockholm syndrome that you think that you need a captor, you need a master, where in fact there's an opportunity for us to actually have systematic change, for us to collectively have collective liberation for all of us. And people are like, oh, let's just vote Trump in because you know what, he's better than Biden right now. And it's like, how much more can we do of this? How much more of the lesser of two evils can we do? Don't we want a better future for ourselves, for our children? Neither parties are actually interested in us, in protecting us, in our progression. They don't care about us. And I think as people of color, it's so important for us to recognize and have it in our consciousness to know when we are being indoctrinated, when they're talking that sweet talk to us, because we are participating in our own oppression at this point. Just a couple hours ago, the Israeli military has informed Palestinians to evacuate Rafah border. There is nowhere for Palestinians to go. They have bombed every part of Gaza. There is no safe place in Gaza. Where can 1.5 million people in Gaza go? Where? There is no safe place. They are preparing to invade Rafah border, and their solution is basically to kill and exterminate everyone in Gaza. Do you understand? We are watching a genocide. We are watching Palestinians record their genocide on a minute-by-minute basis. We are watching children being blown up to pieces. Do you understand how fucking alarming this is? They are going to kill everyone in Palestine. Everyone in Gaza will die. And we are watching it on a minute by minute basis. They are using our tax dollars to kill them. They are using our tax dollars to test out weapons that they have never used before on Palestinians, on innocent people. We are watching children being blown up to pieces. We are watching mothers and fathers mourn the loss of their children. We are watching children mourn the losses of their families, of their entire families. Bloodlines have been completely erased. Entire bloodlines have been completely erased. They are planning to invade Rafah border. I need you to understand what that means. When they invade Rafah border, that is it. We have such a small opportunity to speak up, to try to save Palestinians, because they are trying to exterminate them all. I cannot believe we are watching this. I cannot believe every day I open my phone and it is something new. It is something new. A new form of torture, a new form of violence, mass graves being uncovered of Palestinians zip-tied, buried alive. People were buried alive. Doctors tortured to death. Do you understand what will happen when Israelis invade Rafah border? That will be the end of it. There will be nothing else to say. There is nothing else to say. I cannot believe what we are doing to human beings. When I say that there is another country controlling America, this is what I mean. 12 U.S. senators threatened the ICC chief prosecutor with sanctions over possible arrest warrants against Israel. So reports came out that the International Criminal Court was going to issue arrest warrants for the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu for committing genocide on Palestinians in Gaza. What did these Republican senators do in response? Well, they started to threaten employees and associates that work for the ICC from entering the U.S. Since 2021, the ICC has been investigating possible war crimes that the Israeli occupation has been committing on Palestinians in the Palestinian territories. Now, the ICC doesn't have the power to enforce any of these arrests. They depend on member states to make the arrest. But the ICC can charge officials with war crimes and genocide. Here's where it gets interesting. The U.S. and Israel does not recognize the ICC, but Palestinians do. The court says it does have jurisdiction over the occupied Palestinian territories, including Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. But when the ICC issued arrest warrants for Vladimir Putin when Russia invaded Ukraine, the U.S. President Joe Biden supported the ICC. What's so interesting is that the ICC came into existence in 2002 to prosecute Saddam Hussein. But because Saddam's most serious offenses happened prior to 2002, the ICC could not actually prosecute him. What's so interesting to me personally is that the United States of America supports the ICC fully when they go after Arab and African war criminals and leaders, or any of America's enemies, including people like Gaddafi and Vladimir Putin. However, America itself has never been held accountable for its war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. And now, U.S. politicians have so much power and influence that they can actually threaten members and employees and associates that work for the ICC for issuing an arrest warrant against a genocidal maniac. We are bearing witness to one of the most vicious and violent genocides in modern history. We are watching Palestinians record their genocide. We are watching them upload videos of their genocide on a minute-by-minute basis. We are bearing witness to this. And the ICC is finally doing their fucking job to issue an arrest warrant against this genocidal maniac to bring an end to this genocide, right? And our U.S. politicians are going after the court. Do you understand how ridiculous this is? Do you understand who fucking controls the world? This is a list of all the war criminals that the ICC has issued arrest warrants for since its inception. Majority of them are all Arab and African leaders. Never has the US and Israel been on this list, and this is what we should all be questioning. You know those videos where people call out pro-Palestinian protesters and activists for being woke, for caring about this genocide and saying that, pro-Palestinian protesters don't actually care about social issues. They're just riding this train and this wave of being pro-Palestinian. Those people can absolutely go fuck themselves, for real. Like, I don't understand how fucking cold people have to be to look at a live genocide and see the amount of people who are completely heartbroken, seeing images of children being blown up to pieces, seeing parents and families mourn their loved ones, seeing people being trapped, seeing no humanitarian aid going into Gaza, seeing people being starved to death. I don't know how people can see that and then see the amount of people who are completely heartbroken all around the world from seeing this and think, oh, those people who are heartbroken, those people who are protesting to end this genocide, they're just being fucking woke. They're just riding this wave. Like, I don't understand how fucking cold a human being has to be. And I had to take a moment to sit there and think, because majority of these videos that I see are white Americans and some people of color who are mostly Americans. And I recognize that it's not so much that we're talking about Palestine. It's not so much that we're protesting. It's the fact that we are forcing them to confront the issues that people of color have been facing for generations. White people, especially white Americans, have had the privilege of avoiding political issues. They have had the privilege of avoiding seeing oppression that people of color have to go through because of them, because of their capitalism, because of their government, because of their consumerism. They have the privilege of being able to look away. And the fact is, when we march, when we protest, when we are making videos on social media, we force them to look at what's happening. And that's the shit that they get frustrated with. It's not so much that, we're actually protesting. It's the fact that we're in their face, is that we're not stopping. And that's frustrating them. Because for generations, white people have had the privilege to look away, to simply look away. They don't want to look at the oppression. They don't want to look at the struggle that people of color in the global South have to endure. And I cannot believe how fucking cold they have made their hearts. Like, I don't know how these people have children, have nephews and nieces and grandkids and cousins and, kids in their family. And then they see Palestinian children, they see black and brown children fucking dying in the most disgusting and violent and vicious ways. And they turn their feelings off to that. They completely shut down their feelings to it. They don't fucking see us. They don't see us as fucking human beings. And you know what? I so hope that one day these people have to hold their lifeless child. And when they hold their lifeless child, I hope that they think about black and brown people. I hope that in this lifetime, they experience that karma. It is so imperative that they feel the karma. And I don't wish this upon them in a nasty place, from a nasty place. I say it because it is so important for these people to experience the feelings that people of color have to experience. It is so important for them to experience compassion, for them to evolve as human beings, because the stagnation of white people, in growth, in evolving, it's crazy. So I pray that in this lifetime you endure this type of suffering so that your soul can evolve.
When I was in high school, I was on Tumblr and I once said that white people have no culture. And at the time I took it down because I wasn't ready for that conversation. But I think I was half right, because it's not that white people have no culture. It's that whiteness has no culture. Walk with me. When I say black people, blackness, black culture, something comes to your head, whether it is a certain type of food, whether it is a certain dialect, like African American vernacular English, whether it's the way that the culture does hair, whatever it is, something comes to mind. Usually this is black Americans, but this is anybody impacted by the diaspora, because we are all connected by the diaspora and there's culture and community built out of that. Blackness as a functional concept has a culture because one had to be built out of the fact that we were separated from our national and ethnic ties because, slavery. But whiteness didn't work that way. Whiteness was just, we're not that guy, we're better than that guy, and here's why. And that list was just a bunch of human attributes. But they didn't see it that way because they were so busy dehumanizing people of color. And so no white identity or white culture came out of that besides like white supremacy, because there's no cultural ties or communal ties beyond not that guy. Which is why when people say like whiteness and white culture, what comes to mind? Jokes probably, can't dance, can't season food, but realistically, it's blank. And so when you try to fill in the gaps as to what white culture is, you usually pick up on things that are related to the nationality or ethnicity that you're closest to. For Americans, it's like, nuh-uh, it's apple pie and baseball. No, baby, that's American. And that is a shared cultural experience because we're all here. But there's not like one thing that's unique to whiteness. It has no culture because its whole culture is based on the fact that it's just not that guy. Which is why these white Disney princesses outside of Merida, who is very close to her culture and heritage, are so replaceable. Because when white folk made whiteness the standard and did so by sticking almost exclusively to bare minimum human experience stories, we all have them, can all conceptualize them, and can all think of them in our own cultures and communities. So they became easy to swap out. Yeah, whiteness has no culture because by design, it doesn't need one and doesn't want one. But white people can have culture because you guys exist outside of your race, because you got to still be connected to like nationality and heritage and all that stuff that you made sure that people of color, namely black folk, didn't get. So I've always been interested in true crime, especially when I was like a kid and a teenager. I watched all the documentaries and the TV shows and all that. And I always thought that those kinds of crimes just didn't happen to black girls, that we were so undesirable by society's standard that it kind of backfired in a weird way and kept us safe. And I know that's a wild train of thought, but when I was a kid, there wasn't any media that centered black women victims. It was always white women. So I just thought it didn't happen. And as I got older, I obviously learned that I was wrong, that actually these crimes happen to black women and black girls in disproportionate, overwhelming numbers, and we just don't talk about it. For years, I wondered how that could happen, how even in communities that flock around this type of violence, black women somehow still manage to be excluded. And yet in instances like the murder of Sade Robinson, I'm reminded exactly how that happens. And it's because y'all don't care. If you didn't know, Sade Robinson was a 19-year-old black girl from Wisconsin who went missing on April 1st after she went on a first date. Recently, parts of her body were discovered in a park in Milwaukee. This story is brutal and horrifying and very much in development. And what gets me is that not only is there not a lot of discourse surrounding her death, but the discourse that is happening is fruitless. It's a lot of, well, the guy was white and that's why you don't go on dates with white people and that's why you don't date outside your race. Or if he was a black man, everybody would be talking about it, but he's white and that's why you know why no one's saying anything. And those things aren't true. Regardless of the race of the perpetrator, no one talks about the endless stream of violence that faces black women. Black women are 6 times more likely to be unalived in the United States than white women. And yet, black women deserve safety and protection and to have their stories heard and their lives honored, not for their deaths to be caught up in some type of silly discourse if it gets caught up or gets any attention at all. There's no reason that I grew up thinking that crimes like that just wouldn't happen to me, especially when it was more likely to happen to me than any of the people around me. And that is a societal failing on a scale that I have no words for. Sade Robinson rests in the most heavenly, blissful peace, and may her family have some type of support and care from us instead of endless discourse or sweeping this under the rug. You have something nice to say to someone, you should say it. Whether they're your best friend or a relative or a loose acquaintance or even a stranger. If you've got something kind to say, you should just say it. And I get it. It takes guts. It's a little scary because you never know how people are really going to respond, especially for the people who hang out in that like loose space of like friend acquaintance-ish, because like you know your best friends and you don't know strangers, so they almost carry the same amount of risk. But do it anyway. I was having like a weirdly rough afternoon. I'm fine, just hormonal. And out of the blue, someone I rarely speak to, like just a loose friend of mine, sent me something really nice just because I was on their mind, and it makes me feel like 1,000 times better. And like the other day I had my friend join my live for the first time. It's like the first time we've really like spoken almost like on the phone, and it was such an amazing experience, and she was so kind, and I'm going to tag her because y'all should also follow her. Like both of those experiences have made me think about like all the times where I could have sent the TikTok or sent the joke or sent the compliment, and I didn't because I was too scared of how that connection might turn out. Just do it. Just do it. You really might make someone's day.
Just want y'all to slow it down and realize that social media isn't real life.
This is Gary Hilton. He's also known as the National Forest serial killer. Between 2007 and 2008, he has unalived 4 women, potentially more. Their bodies were almost always found brutalized and dismembered. This is Laken Riley, whose beaten body was discovered earlier this year after she went missing on a running trail on her campus. This is 24-year-old Felicia Johnson, who in 2022 was reported missing from her hotel in Houston after her cell phone and purse were found bloodied in a nearby park. A year later, they found her body in a bag dismembered in the forest. The man who allegedly did it, while charged, has not been caught. In 2022 alone, over 4,000 women in the United States were unalived, and over 442,000 were raped or SA'd. Conversely, there's an average of 1 black bear attack a year, most of them non-fatal. And between 2000 and 2015, 24 people have been unalived by a grizzly bear in the entirety of North America. This is the real world, and while you might be upset by it, you might feel like you don't understand why you're being lumped in with all these other guys because it'll never be you. The reality is you probably know a woman who has been in one of these situations and likely a man who has put her there. Conversely, you'll probably never meet anyone who's been attacked by a bear. And the reality of the situation is women will always pick the bear because at least the bear is predictable. And we know that there are fates worse than death. Humans are not governed by nature, and so we can make choices. It's somehow supposed to be a defense as to why men are safer than bears. But you mean to tell me that with no prompting by nature whatsoever, men will choose to harass, stalk, attack, rape, unalive, dismember women willy-nilly, and they're supposed to be safer than the bear because they choose to do so? Because bears are driven by instinct, you know how that interaction is probably going to go. 9 times out of 10, because #NotAllBears, that bear is going to walk away so long as you don't threaten it or it's not particularly hungry. And we know how to not threaten a bear. Stay a good distance apart, avoid eye contact, worst case scenario, play dead. And even if all else fails, because bears are driven by instinct, the worst thing that bear is going to do is eat me. And I'm not going to say that's not a horrible way to go, because it is. But it is literally as worse as it gets. When a man has choice, and out of that endless freedom comes endless horrors. Is that man just going to walk past me? Is he going to catcall me? Is he going to touch me inappropriately? Is he going to hit me in the face for no real reason? Is he going to grape me? Is he going to SA me? Is he going to unalive me? Is he going to hide my body and not tell my parents where it is? All of these are choices that men make that we don't understand when or why they make them. And you think that the freedom of choice is the defense for choosing men? I'm gagged. I'm going with the bear. Bears are not interested in people. Nature in general is not interested in people. And if you encounter a bear, it will not be on sight. In a perfect world, you and that bear will leave each other alone. I've recently learned that some men are petrified of bears. Not the normal amount, but like shaking in their boots as if they are little berries or deers prancing about the woods. While I can remind you that a bear will not attack you instantly as soon as you see it because eating human is not a part of their daily diet, and if it was, we would have had more than 24 fatal attacks from a grizzly bear in the last 15 years, that's not going to put your mind at ease, is it? Because despite the facts, the stats, and the evidence, you're afraid, and that's okay. So here are some tips to help ease your mind when it comes to bear attacks. First things first, carry bear spray. I carry pepper spray in case of a man attack. You should carry bear spray in case of a bear attack. Second, keep your distance from the bear. I try to stay about a street width across from men I don't know. That's about as far away from a bear that you should try to stay. Now, you might encounter a dedicated or curious bear who's going to approach you no matter what. Here's what you do. Lucky for you, bears come labeled. There are black bears and there are brown and grizzly bears. And depending on what they look like, it tells you what to do. Black bears are generally easy to scare. A loud noise will likely startle them off. But if they're determined to attack, fight back. Give it all you've got, punch them in the nose. Again, they'll usually go away. Brown and grizzly bears? Not so much. According to National Park Services, the best thing you can do in case of an attack is just to play dead. If you fight back, it will just make them more aggressive. And if you try to run, it will make all bears more aggressive. So don't do that. And that's it. There's nothing else. That bear will not kidnap you, will not grape or SA you, will not follow you home, will not continue to cause you harm. That's all. I hope this gives you some peace of mind. And with that ease, you can help us think of some tips to survive a man attack. Because we have none of those. All we've got is to try and stay out of the woods. Every person needs to have access to emergency medical care, and this includes pregnant people who need abortions. But anti-abortion lawmakers and their allies are willing to endanger the lives of pregnant people just to keep that from happening. And this isn't some dystopian hypothetical, it is happening right now. On April 24th, the Supreme Court will start to hear oral arguments from a case in Idaho, and that case will determine if states with abortion bans can override the federally mandated Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, or EMTALA. EMTALA is a federal law that guarantees people in emergency situations can get access to the care that they need if they're in a hospital emergency room, even if they're pregnant, even if they need an abortion, even in states with abortion bans. This law was specifically put in place to save the lives of people in medical emergencies, even pregnant people. But anything less than a full rejection of Idaho's attempt to fully enforce their ban will change all of that, putting the lives of pregnant people in more danger now than ever before. And let's be clear, this isn't about valuing the lives of the vulnerable and the unborn. This is deliberate and intentional cruelty. They are willing to override federal law, even if it means letting pregnant people die. The consequences will be catastrophic if the Supreme Court allows for states to ignore this federal law that guarantees people access to the medical care they need in emergencies, even abortions, despite it being in place for 40 years. So unless the Supreme Court is just willing to let pregnant people die or suffer serious medical complications, they have to make sure that EMTALA stays in place. The impacts of war, genocide, and mass violence are way more detrimental to the earth and the environment than using plastic straws or driving your car or any of the other 8 billion things that big corporations and the government try to tell us that we need to do to protect the earth. And I'm not saying that we as individuals don't have a role to play in protecting our environment, because we absolutely do, but the role that we as individuals play oftentimes gets overinflated so that corporations and the government and whomever can continue carrying on and terrorizing the environment while we're blaming each other. For example, not only was white phosphorus banned because of its brutal impact on the human body, but because its toxic properties linger in our soil and water for years, which devastates the environment. Or how the overwhelming majority of CO2 emissions in the entire world came from the first 60 days of Israel's genocide against the Palestinians. Half of those emissions came from U.S. planes sending weapons to Israel. And this is outside of the regular impact of war and conflict on the world, including land destruction and agricultural destruction, pollutants in the air from all of the weaponry and all of the fires, and destruction of buildings, which leaves behind tons and tons of toxic debris. So this Earth Day, while we should absolutely continue the small things that we as individuals do to protect our Earth, we should also be using this day and every day to call for a ceasefire, because the best thing we can do for our environment is end this. Joe Biden does know he can just quit, right? That he can resign today, that certainly no one is making him run again, that there's no reason that he needs to literally throw the election away. He can just leave. Because the alternative is that somewhere between arrogant and stupid, he believes that the younger generation just hates Donald Trump so much, will vote for him no matter what he does. And that just isn't the case. Because in addition to him just spitting in the younger generation's face by doing stuff like sending several billion more dollars to perpetuate the genocide, we're setting up encampments on college campuses just to protest, all the way up to banning the app that literally got him elected, he forgets the very simple thing that younger people just don't like to vote. Because while there's always been more of us than of them, we, younger people, don't believe in voting. We don't believe in the democratic infrastructure because it has let us down time and time again, and we can see that. And so a huge part of the 2020 movement was to just get young people to go vote. It was just to get us to go. And as a result, we had the largest election turnout for young people ever. He repays us by essentially doubling down and saying, yeah, just because you voted for us doesn't mean that anything you want to happen will ever happen. We will still do what we want to do. And all that does is make younger people, again, not trust the government and not want to vote. Because it doesn't matter how much we hate Donald Trump. If we also hate Joe Biden, then we will just stay home. And I'm not saying that needs to be our strategy, because it shouldn't be. If anything, we need to vote now more than ever, just for our state and local elections, because that will literally be the thing that saves us as our federal government continues to fall apart and spit in our faces. However, that is the reality, is that if we feel stuck, we just won't go. And if he paid a lick of attention to anybody that wasn't him or AIPAC or all the other entities that are using these bills and laws and moments to make money, he would know that. He would know that this is just an objectively stupid campaign strategy. But he doesn't. He doesn't. So I say again, I hope he knows he can just resign. He can just leave. And that will be the best thing he could do for the American people. He just doesn't care. Tragic.
Also would rape her and bring other men to do the same to her as well as beat her.
Bring in other men. That's what I want us to focus on right now. They would bring in other men. So if you go back and watch the rest of that video, you'd know that what happened to Junko is horrific, and that creator doesn't even get into all the graphic, gory details. But what I want us to focus on is that these guys would bring in other men. Meaning that because one guy was rejected, he convinced his group of friends to kidnap and torture this girl, and that group of friends would bring in other essentially random men to come in and do violence against her. And that's why the not all men argument is such a stupid one, because let's just say that not every man who they drug in from the streets to do this to her actually participated. Who saved her? Her torture went on for over 40 days. If not every guy who walked in there did something to her, okay, but did they tell? Did they get help? Did they rescue her? No. Her suffering ended after 40 days when they just lit her on fire because she wasn't attractive anymore. And this isn't even an isolated incident. I listen to a true crime podcast, shout out to Morbid, and periodically they will go, how did these people get so many other people in on this? And that is the question. That is the problem. It's not just one evil guy going around doing this violence endlessly. It's not even him and his small group of other impressionable, awful friends. It's that you can go outside and you've got a chance of finding anyone who will do this. And if you don't find anyone who will also participate, you will find a ton of people, other men, who will say nothing and let the violence continue. And that's why no one cares that it's not all men. That's why so many women would rather be stuck in the woods with a bear than a man, or why we're so weird on first dates and we all carry pepper spray and we travel in clusters at night, because y'all are wild and we don't know what we're going to get or how bad the violence is going to be, because that's an extreme scenario. But small scale violence against women takes place every single day and y'all say nothing. Nothing. So yeah, I'd rather take my chances with the bear. I had something smart to add on the student encampments taking place across the country, but I don't. I am just so in awe and inspired by these students. In the face of difficulty and resistance, from canceled classes and graduations up to aggressive police brutality, these students are consistently putting it all on the line, and they're doing it with grace and Gen Z pizzazz. Building a human wall to protect students while they're praying, to barricading out the police and swinging on them with those giant gallon water bottles, to literally the idea of de-arresting, putting your body in the way to protect someone else. They are doing things that are bold and courageous and risky, and they're doing it with grace, and they're centering Palestine in every conversation, and that is something that we, who are not in the encampments, need to also do. While we are praising them for all of their strong suits, these students are saying, keep your praise, liberate Palestine, eyes on the goal, and we have to do that. And also, as someone who works with college students and teaches college students, and contrary to what my students believe, am not that far removed from being a college student, I am so terrified for them. Every time I see a video of students going toe-to-toe with the police or hear conversations about the National Guard being brought in, I think about the Kent State massacre, and I worry how long it will take until this inevitably ends in bloodshed. And I see the faces of my friends and my colleagues and my students, and I'm horrified. They know this could cost them everything from their relationships to their careers to even their lives, and yet they keep going. And it's with that in mind that we have to do the same. Do not stop talking about Palestine. Do not stop calling for a ceasefire. Do not stop centering the conversation not just around the ceasefire, but around Palestinian liberation as a whole. Because if nothing else, it's what these students want, and it's what Palestinians absolutely deserve. And if you can, support these students. Go to an encampment, bring snacks, bring water, bring good energy, send them some support online, and send your support to all of the Palestinians trying to evacuate right now. The kids are gonna be all right, but we have to make sure we're doing our part too. Men started the whole would you rather be in the forest with a man or a bear conversation as a way to fish for compliments. And they didn't get them, and now they are heated. And the question was never asked from a genuine place, because duh, but it really highlights the fact that we will never stop having these conversations because they don't want the answer. They just want affirmation that they're not that bad. And because that's all they seek, they're never going to get it. I mean, they don't even consider other perspectives enough to understand they asked the wrong question. They're asking from the standpoint of survivability. In their heads, because every bear attacks on sight, of course you would pick a man because you're more likely to survive. And that's all they have to hang their hat on. They can't guarantee that they're less violent, because they're not, or that the torture, pain, and suffering would end sooner, because it won't. I mean, they have nothing else but to say, you're more likely to survive. And women are like, hey, yo, I don't wanna. Because men cannot fathom a fate worse than death. Because they cannot wrap their brains around the brutality that happens at the hands of men. Because they cannot fathom the idea that women are like, I would rather lose my life to someone who is logically going to take it, like a bear who's just trying to survive, as opposed to a man who just wanted to on a random Tuesday. They are flabbergasted and upset by the answers to this question because they cannot see an alternative perspective. And so while they're arguing for their lives over this silly hypothetical so that maybe they can get some affirmation that men are just not that bad, the harm and violence is continuing. Instead of holding men accountable and working to dismantle the patriarchy so that women can feel safer in the woods with a strange man than with a bear, they're just upset that we don't, because they cannot fathom another perspective. And not only is it just frustrating as a woman to hear, because deep down, you know that they know that this is the reality. It's why they treat their daughters that way. But it's also just kind of sad to see on their behalf. Because I don't want men to feel bad about themselves. I don't want them to feel like every single woman is terrified of them and sees them in this dark light. I can imagine how upsetting that might feel. But until they consider how upsetting it is to live in a reality where a bear makes you feel safer than a man, it just ain't that deep. It's just not. They're just fishing for compliments. If you're one of those people who feels the need to comment on like parent posts or the posts of pregnant people talking about how like they're disappointing or how they're doing something wrong or how they're letting their child down or blah, 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 I have a task for you. Conversely, if you're one of those people who's like, oh my gosh, I love babies and pregnant people and I want them all to be happy and successful, then I have the same task for you. So by now you've likely heard of OOB, and if you have, fantastic, and if you haven't, hi, they're an awesome organization of folks gathering resources, gathering aid, gathering funds to help people escape Rafah and also live during a genocide and have access to the things that they need to get by in their day-to-day life. When you see people advocating and fundraising on behalf of different Palestinian families, and I hope that you do, OOB does a lot of that work. But you might not know they also have a perinatal project where they help send aid and funds to organizations on the ground to help with anything that new babies and new families might need. And as you can see, you can donate here. Yes, I know they already hit their goal. The great thing is that this is a continuous project, a continuous fundraiser, so you can continue to donate. But if you're looking for more direct ways to contribute, great. Check out their Blink in Lio, go to their spreadsheet, click on the tab that says OOB Perinatal Cause, and pick a family. Like this one. That's Mohammed, that's Vidal, and that's Sham, their 2-year-old baby girl. Vidal is currently pregnant with their second child and is due for a C-section on May 11th. And as we know, the health system in Gaza right now has collapsed due to the continuous ongoing genocide and constant bombings. So this is not the ideal situation to be in. As you can see, they have a long way to go on their fundraiser, and you can help with that. Or you can help with another family. And you can help with another family as possible. So instead of constantly yelling at folk online because of your own unhealed trauma, do something to lend a hand. And if you're one of those amazing people who already loves to offer their care and support, here's just another way that you can do that.
I never seen a mama bear put her babies in a...
So ever since I found out I was pregnant, I've been having these moments where I realize that society really doesn't see women as individuals, and this is one of those moments. In the eyes of this man and many other men, and even society as a whole, we have a role to fulfill, whether it be intimately, reproductively, or domestically. And at the end of the day, that role oftentimes boils down to servitude and motherhood. It's why, even in this hypothetical situation, guys like this cannot help but do the same thing to the bear. Because regardless of the fact that this bear is still a bear at the end of the day, it's, oh, well, at least she's fulfilling her role as mother in a way that you humans don't, even though that's objectively untrue, as some mama bears eat their cubs if they are sickly or deformed in some way. It's why, as this guy goes on to talk about the absolutely devastating consequences of postpartum depression, postpartum rage, and postpartum psychosis, he only sees it in the lens of, oh, this mom let her family down, and not the community let this mom down when they did not get her the help that she so desperately needed before it went on to negatively impact her children to the point of death. There is no space for needs or wants or disappointments or dreams or independence. You have a role to do, and you better do that role correctly, or else I'd rather be in the woods with a bear who does. And I can see how that builds resentment, not only amongst the gender wars, but amongst women as a unit. I've never gotten more hate in my life than after I announced that I was pregnant, overwhelmingly from women. And I was wondering why, but I'm starting to wonder if we as women have started to internalize some of that energy. And our own traumas notwithstanding, as we work to resist these very systems, do we get a little upset with the women who perpetuate them by stepping wholeheartedly into these roles of servitude like motherhood? Because we're not allowed to be independent individual people, we are viewed as a monolith. And so the monolith better move one way or else the whole monolith gets stuck. And I could be way off the mark here. I very likely am. But it's the idea that came to me while I listened to this guy, on the heels of many other guys, ramble on and on about how they'd rather be stuck in the woods with a bear, not because women pose some greater threat to their livelihoods or their well-being or their safety, the way that women have been talking about for days, but because women failed them in some domestic or intimate role, and therefore they're better off with the bear because of it. I wonder how all this noise that we're always hearing gets internalized in us. But I don't know. Anyway, that guy's dumb. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, and we should absolutely be having conversations about mental health and destigmatization and access to resources and mental illness and all the things that go beyond the romanticization of mental health and mental illness, like lighting a candle and taking a bath. However, you cannot mental health your way out of the impacts of poverty and capitalism. You cannot mental health your way out of the impacts of bigotry and discrimination and hate, especially when we are consuming it all of the time. You cannot mental health your way out of intentional and deliberate social isolation and ostracization. You can't mental health your way out of a system where you are intentionally overworked and underpaid and burnt out. You just can't. And a part of destigmatizing mental health needs to not only be destigmatizing mental illness and providing actual treatment and making sure that resources are actually accessible, but it also needs to be confronting the systemic issues in place that cause so many of our mental illnesses and mental and emotional distress. There are issues that doing our best, be it lighting a candle and saying no more often, or therapy and medication, while they might make us feel better, they cannot fix. And a part of mental health awareness and taking care of ourselves is working to create a world where that is sustainable long term. The little stuff absolutely matters. And on that note, call a friend today. But the big things matter too. Happy Mental Health Awareness Month. I have never ever encountered a group of people so desperate to be the victims before that they compared themselves to a population of people facing an active and ongoing genocide. Do y'all hear yourselves when you talk? Do you reread before you hit enter on those comments? Some of y'all are so mad that women would rather be in the woods with a bear than with you that you are actually comparing yourselves to victims of a genocide. And the gag is that actual violence is still taking place during this genocide. You're not even catching the point here. Male IDF soldiers are raping and harassing and essaying Palestinian women and girls on a consistent basis. They hold up their underwear and their lingerie in pictures to demoralize them and for us to laugh at them. I mean, bringing up extremist groups at all is ridiculous considering every single nation has one, but especially using Palestine as an example is absurd. I mean, we're not even viewing men as extremists here, especially in a country where 1 out of every 6 women will be a victim of rape or attempted rape at some point in her lifetime. We have a lower chance of getting breast cancer. I mean, this is just peak victim mentality. This is peak woe is me. You don't want to be in the woods alone with me and therefore you're creating division. Babe, why do you want women to be alone in the woods with men so bad? Let's start there. Why can't we say no? What is it with y'all and hearing the words no that makes y'all jump this far? Check that out first. And never do this again. Go donate to a family in need. Go make yourself useful. Go atone for this one.
I don't even know if this is going to reach anybody because I tried to make a video similar to this the other day and the For You page said, we don't like that at all. I'm trying to direct people to go over to Erin Hattemer's page, and if you go into her bio, you will see families that are in need in Gaza who need money to evacuate. There's this initiative that she's doing called Pass the Hat that's in collaboration with Operation Olive Branch. I have heard plenty of influencers say that they have been on the wait list to adopt a family, so I didn't know if I was even going to be able to do that. But in the meantime, go over to her page and go donate. Like, I literally just picked one of the families that she had on there and I donated. Everybody can do their part. So if you're able, that's great. If you can't, boost this video. Thanks.
What does your For You page look like? Because my entire For You page right now is Gaza, student protests on college campuses, what's happening in Sudan, what's happening in Haiti, what's happening in Congo, Canadians boycotting Loblaws, people expressing their disgust with the Met Gala and making comparisons to the Hunger Games, people organizing to start mass blocking celebrities across all platforms. I'm making this video because I saw another content creator make this exact video and say that this is what their For You page looks like. I couldn't stitch it because the music was like too loud for my voice. Anyway, it prompted me to take a step back and actually be happy about it for a second. Because I noticed it immediately, but I was like, no, like there's so much more to be done. And absolutely there is. But for a second, acknowledge that it's beautiful to see. This is exactly why they're banning TikTok, by the way. But I love to see it. And the major difference is that it's not just people who look like me who are making the videos. It's cis-het white middle upper class men, cis-het middle class white women who are creating content about this. And I'm not praising them for finally jumping on board. I'm just saying that we're at a point now where our voices cannot be ignored. Like, it's not possible. So anyway, going back to my question at the beginning, what does your For You page look like? Is it still happy baby videos and dog videos and dance videos? Like, what are you consuming online right now? Just some food for thought. I need us to be so aware of the fact that TikTok a few months ago really started prioritizing longer form content, and people have been posting that long form content. People are reading out like entire thesis statements, 10-minute long videos explaining the ins and outs, explaining all the details of conflicts around the world. I also wanted to add that the 2x feature is such a game changer. The amount of information I am able to consume on a day-to-day basis. I saw a comment on one of my other videos about this where someone was saying that we have short attention spans now because of TikTok and whatever, and how we aren't really sharing information. That 2x feature makes a 10-minute video feel like 30 seconds. I'm telling you. Just this morning, I watched a 10-minute detailed video about the Haitian Revolution, and it literally felt like it went by in 2 minutes. And all of that information is now in my brain, fully retained. I know people get caught with doom scrolling and using TikTok as an escape and whatever, but like, if you just curate your For You page in a way where when you're doom scrolling, you're learning, like you're just gathering and taking in information, like helpful, necessary, important information, you're not going to feel as bad about going to bed a couple hours later. I'm not condoning using TikTok to procrastinate. I'm just saying. Again, this isn't anything new, but for anybody watching this video right now and your For You page doesn't look like what I explained at the beginning, I just want you to know that all of the information is here. People are finally starting to recognize that there's power in numbers. We are stronger than the 1%. They need us. They need our money. They need our resources. They need our attention to maintain power and to maintain authority. So the more people we can get on board with paying attention and waking up, the better it's going to be for all of us.
Did you know that Carlisle Cullen is the richest fictional character like ever? And I'm not making that up. Like, actually, he's been listed by Forbes so many times as the richest fictional character. His net worth is like $34 billion. And what's interesting about that is, you know, that I love to talk about, and you guys love to talk about it with me, how Carlisle is actually extremely morally corrupt. He's actually a total weirdo, and he doesn't actually care about people like that, as billionaires generally don't. And we can actually see that happening right now all over the world. Actually, what I wanted to talk about, I do not have that Carlisle money, and there's a good chance you don't either, but you don't have to. I hope that you will just listen to me for just a minute and consider reading about and helping Miriam's family. Miriam and her husband and her sweet little 2-year-old have been struggling to survive in the wreckage of Rafah since their home was destroyed. She was pregnant, and she just last week gave birth to a little baby girl with no anesthesia or medical care. And not only have they lost their home, but so many loved ones, their community, their livelihood, and unfortunately families like Miriam's who have managed to survive thus far and active are now faced with unimaginable financial burdens to escape or move forward in any way, and essentially no way to make that money. The link to help Miriam is at the very top of my link tree on my page, and she's also number 118 on the perinatal portion of the Operation Olive Branch spreadsheet. Operation Olive Branch has done so much, and I think so importantly has made helping easy and clear and concise, and just given people an easy and direct way to do that. And of course, everybody knows Erin Hadimer with the Pass the Hat project, which is amazing, and also for acknowledging that Black and brown creators like those responsible for Operation Olive Branch have been doing this for months, and it often requires a white person to acknowledge it and to bring awareness to it for it to gain the necessary traction. But what matters at the moment, because it is so dire, is that it is gaining traction and that it does work and it does help. You do not have to have a huge following. You don't have to have billionaire money. You don't have to have a lot of money. I think so many of us just get caught up in not knowing what to do or not knowing where to start or how to do it, so we don't do anything or we don't do as much as we'd like to. This has done a wonderful job of demonstrating that this is a collective effort, and to just do it. You don't have to be educated or make think pieces on it to say this is wrong and I want to help. Of course, educate yourself, but it doesn't have to be complicated. I think Erin said in one of her videos, I'm not yelling at you, I'm cheering you on to help. And like Operation Olive Branch said, you don't have to wait to be assigned a family. Just go donate, share, make a video, whatever you want to do. And also, these people you're using for Stan Wars, they don't care, and if they're only doing it to make themselves look good and not get canceled, let them do it and just let them spend their money, because it's helping right now.
It makes me so unbelievably angry that we live in a world where the phrase civilized society exists, where we live in a world where there's governments and taxes and laws and roads, and yet the only thing we can consistently rely on to actually ensure that people have their basic human needs, their basic civil rights met, is each other. We have to fucking crowdfund to ensure that our fellow humans can live. And it's been horrifying enough watching it happen in America, the country that has from day one branded itself as the greatest, most powerful, wealthiest, freest country in the world. And yet citizens die here every single fucking day because they can't afford basic human necessities. They can't afford basic life-saving healthcare. And they often have no choice but to turn to their fellow Americans and say, do you have any money? Please help me save my own life. But it's unlocked a whole new level of rage seeing the American government continue to send billions of American taxpayer dollars to Israel so that they can indiscriminately bomb the people, the children of Gaza. No matter how many hospitals get hit, no matter how many mass graves are uncovered, no matter how many people in this country are upset and don't want this, the politicians do not seem to care. And yet again, the only option we have is to reach into our own pockets, reach into our own limited resources in a cost of living and an economic crisis, and try and pay to help save someone from our own taxpayer dollars killing them. But no matter how angry this makes me, because it's not the way it should be, not even close, it is unfortunately the way that things are. And I have felt so fucking useless over the past several months, and it's been profoundly disturbing watching all of this happen. And I haven't been able to operate the same way. I make far less content because I feel it's so much more important to amplify the people that are speaking about things that fucking matter. And I've been very active in reposting and sharing information here on my other platforms as much as I can. But I'm so inequipped to do what needs to be done here. And this is something. This is fucking something that we can do. This is something. So I know you've already probably seen dozens, if not hundreds, of videos like this in the past week or so, but Operation Olive Branch is doing incredible work. And just looking through that spreadsheet it's incredibly painful. There are thousands of families in need, and choosing one is an impossible task, but it's all I can do. So this is Abed al-Salam's family. He is safely in Germany. And sadly, his younger brother has already been martyred, and his sister is 8 months pregnant. And they're stuck. They're stuck with their family in Gaza, and they don't have medical care. There are many members of his family that need medical care, many small children. So I was happy to be able to donate to his campaign yesterday, and this is something we can do. So Abed's family is currently sheltering in Rafah after being displaced from their home. I can't even imagine. I've been pregnant. The latest stage of your pregnancy is incredibly difficult and stressful, and stress is really difficult for your baby. I mean, there's just so much about this that's so horrifying. So, if you can donate, if you can share, if you can do anything, it's something, it's something.